Hi there, and welcome to Israel Explained. What's going on with this list edition? So, earlier today, a list was published in Saudi media that was purported to be the list that Hamas was providing Israel regarding the hostages it was ready to release in a deal. It turns out that that list was not one provided by Hamas, but instead was one provided by Israel to Hamas back in July of the 34 hostages that Israel wishes to receive as part of the first stage um, of a hostage deal, the so called humanitarian stage. The release of the list, according to a high level Israeli source, was, quote, doesn't mean anything. There are negotiations over the list. It is moving forward, but in the end, this is a brutal terror organization. End quote. Hamas is saying publicly that it's willing to release all 34 of the hostages in the list, including the Bibas family, which is on it. But they're not willing to say whether these hostages are alive or dead. And according to most sources, some of them are alive, some of them are dead. So the fact that someone is on this list, that doesn't mean very much. There's four categories of hostages on this list. The first is seven women and children. That includes the Bibas children. The next category is the five female soldier observers taken from the Nahal Oz base. That includes Liri Elbag, who we just saw a video of, indicating that she's probably still alive. 11 men aged 50 to 85, including Shlomo Mansour and others, and 11 other hostages, including veteran ones from before the war, like Averu Menjitsu, who has been there for many, many years and was included on the list. What the list does not include is male soldiers and several of the younger, healthier quote unquote hostages, especially male ones. It focuses on women, children, and the sick. And that's why this list is sometimes called the humanitarian list. And first phase of the hostage exchange is sometimes called the humanitarian phase. What the list does not include is any of the people that Israel believed in July were dead. At this point, there's over 30 hostages that Israel has strong indications of that they are dead. None of them are on the list. The Israeli goal is to get as many live people out in the first stage as possible. It appears that Hamas's goal, meanwhile, is to include as many dead bodies in the first stage as possible because they're considered less valuable by Hamas in order to get leverage. The existence of this list and its publication is, and this is not too surprising, very uncomfortable for the hostage families, causing them a lot of distress. Um, they feel like favorites are being played between this hostage family, that hostage family. It's dividing them. It undermines their struggle to get everyone released, and that is possibly the point. Also, to cause distress to the families is something that Hamas has done intentionally in the past, and that could also be part of the reason. One hostage family member, Anat Angerset, said that her father is a Holocaust survivor, and seeing lists of selection for Jews is incredibly distressing for him, and he's reliving the Holocaust again. So, this is the kind of distress that this sort of step is causing to the hostage families. And the context here, of course, is Hamas putting pressure on Israel, putting pain on Israel to try to increase its leverage in the negotiations. So, speaking of the negotiations, how are these negotiations going? Well, there are talks in Doha right now, and that's always a good sign. But the head of the Mossad is not there. Instead, it's being held at a working level, which is a lower level. And that means that there's no breakthrough yet. Sources have told Ynet, the Israeli website, that Barnea will not go for no reason. So he goes, it means we have reached a crucial moment in the negotiations. So in the past, Barnea and other high up officials have been sent early in the talks. That sometimes has been a mistake. It's sometimes best to only send high-ranking officials when there's about to be a breakthrough, and that seems to be what Israel is doing right now. Now, why has there not been a breakthrough, despite there being a lot of talk about optimism about these talks? That's because every time that Israel and Hamas seem to be reaching an agreement, Hamas is taking a step back. They seem to be doing that intentionally. And it's not clear if they're doing this because they're playing for time or if they're just playing hardball on the way to a deal. The better case scenario, of course, is that they're playing hardball on the way to a deal. That would mean they're trying to get the best terms for a deal that they're trying to reach soon. Um, it's a worse indication if they're trying to play for time and um, don't really have an interest in a deal, but rather are trying to delay the expansion of an Israeli military operation. There have been indications in the Israeli media that some in Hamas believe that Trump might want to end the war rather than exacerbate it. And therefore, they're hoping to get as deep into Trump administration as possible without making concessions. And so, elements in Israeli intelligence, some believe that they're trying to get a deal, some believe that they're not trying to get a deal. There's a real disagreement in Israeli intelligence from what I can see. Meanwhile, the CIA, according to press releases, believes that Hamas does want a deal. One element where there has been movement forward in the negotiations is over the question of the return of civilians to northern Gaza. Panel 12 showed that there had been an agreement to allow women, children, and men to return. That's a big concession by Israel. Israel didn't want men to be allowed, but Hamas, in return, have granted a concession that everyone who goes back to the north will be carefully inspected, but they'll be carefully inspected by an international actor, not by Israel. So the two sides have reached middle ground there. The fact that they've reached middle ground and an understanding is a good sign for a deal, but as we know, Hamas tends to renege from some of the agreements that it's made. Israel also has a bit of a history of reneging from some of these as well. One of the reasons Israel is finding it difficult to negotiate with Hamas right now is it's not really clear who's running the show. If in the past Sinwar, the deceased Sinwar, was clearly running the show. Right now, Muhammad Sinwar, his brother, who is the strongest man in Hamas Gaza, certainly has influence on the talks, but it's not clear if he has as much control as his brother had. It's not clear how much control Hamas from outside Gaza has over the talks. A source told Israeli media, quote, "You don't really know who you're negotiating with. Sinwar, Qatar, you have absolutely no idea." So right now, there's a real war of narratives between Hamas and Israel. A lot of disinformation is being released. Anything that you hear from either side, treat with a lot of suspicion. That's not necessarily a bad thing. That might mean that we're heading towards money time. Of course, the worst interpretation is that, as I said, Hamas is playing for time. We will find out soon. Hopefully, we'll have good news. I'll be here to update next time something interesting happens. If you like what I do here, consider supporting me on Patreon. Consider listening to my history podcast, History of the Land of Israel podcast, where I'll be putting out an episode on the destruction of the biblical kingdom of Israel within the next few days.